just kidding. Alrighty, thank you guys for coming. Sorry for a little bit of the delay, but we've got it all fixed now, and thank you guys for helping with the presentation here. I have like a really funky background screen here, so I'm just going to try and make it a little bit bigger so it's not too distracting. Okay, so, alrighty, so this is Live, Breathe, and Feel Your Drupal Business. And the goal of this discussion is really just to kind of talk about some learnings that 10.7 has had, including myself. Alrighty, so why this session? And I say because sharing is caring. A lot like a few different of the business discussions and also the keynote, what we wanted to do is kind of have a session where we talk about a few things that we've learned in terms of client selection, letting go of clients, people selection, and other little ways, tips and tricks of how to make your organization better. Personally, this is going to, like I said, it's going to be pretty focused on 10.7 and some of my own experience and Yvonne and I's experience just in life and in work. And also, the past 6 months have been a really great learning experience for us, so we thought it was just a really opportune time to share a lot of this information. So with that, I will go into some of the next slide here. Okay, so first part, picking clients. First thing I want to say, it is a luxury. Not everyone has this luxury. Typically, if you're a small business, it could take months, could take years to actually get to this point. And what I mean by it's a luxury is that eventually you want to get to a point where clients are just coming to you, and you're not always having to find clients yourself, and you're not just saying yes to everything. We feel that we're kind of at that point now where we're getting more clients, we can kind of pick and choose, and we can kind of go through an evaluation in order to pick the right clients for us. And we've had enough clients that we know what kind of client we really want. Another thing I wanted to mention is with this luxury, one thing that we had to learn is kind of beef up our new business strategy. Typically, it was just Yvonne. Granted, Yvonne and 10.7, we all kind of work as a democracy. We work together and we determine what kind of clients we want to work for and who we want to pitch to. But one thing we don't necessarily really like doing is responding to RFPs. Because we really want to be able to kind of go through that discovery process up front instead of answer just kind of a load of questions that may not really pertain to the end goal of the relationship with the client or what you actually may be able to do for them. So one thing to note is kind of determine like what that strategy is for you and what you consider a new business. Also, know your values. This is a foundational thing, in my opinion. I think determining what your kind of client is extremely important because that helps you deduce usually what type of clients come to you, and you already have an idea as to which clients you immediately maybe want to say no to, and you don't have to necessarily keep mulling it over every single time. Ensure that you are going to have that equal degree of trust and respect across both parties. Determine if you think you're going to learn something. Is it going to be a potential long-term client? Are there projects that they may have available that you can see working with them for an extremely long time? Make sure you have all the points of contacts. This is all pretty straightforward. Talking about open source versus proprietary. How many of you guys have this conversation often? Several. Okay. We occasionally have this conversation, and I just wanted to bring up this quick point, is that basically how we approach that is talking about open source and people that may be new to Drupal and just open source in general and are quite terrified by it. So we typically like to do our research and make sure that we understand what like closed source systems that they've used, the good and the bad, the ugly of that, and the good and bad of Drupal, because nothing's perfect, but of course we're advocates for open source, so we want them to go that way. But we find ourselves having that conversation fairly often, but I think people are coming around to open source. Okay, determine what is absolutely not on your list. Like, no, we're not going to do that. Client, sorry, can't happen. So for example, One big red flag for us is the client doesn't want to go through a discovery phase. So then basically you should just kind of have a freelancer if you don't want to go through a discovery phase, in my opinion. The budget is entirely too low, and there's absolutely nothing that they can do about that. Another thing is they don't really agree with, or you don't agree with their objectives, and you're not going to learn anything, and you're not going to have that long-term relationship that I spoke about earlier. Okay, so another thing, know your capacity. This is something that we've actually done quite recently, is build a workload map. It is in a spreadsheet form, but we might have some other fancy little tool that we can create to change that. But one thing that made us do this is that as a small business, we can kind of talk to everyone. We're a team of 8, so we can just reach across the table and discuss what are you working on, when, what's in the future. However, we didn't have a data set to actually look at. So when a client came to us and wanted to work on a project, we had to sit there and deliberate maybe for like an hour or two and determine, okay, what's this person working on? And we had to do that almost every time. So we're like, this is kind of ridiculous. It's wasting our time. We need to be able to have a really good snapshot as far out as we absolutely can based on the scope that we have with our current projects and build those hours per person. And then we can say, all right, I know that we have 100 hours of availability in those 2 months with those 2 people. Now we can do that, and it's awesome. But if you don't know your capacity, you could potentially be setting yourself up to fail and taking on projects that you ultimately are going to underdeliver on. And then you're going to build up technical debt, et cetera, and it's just going to be a bad place. You don't want to be there. Oh yeah, I forgot to show my cute little Legos, guys. So you don't want to be in this situation. Okay. Have a client selection process. Always determine the why when you're meeting with clients. When they come to you, whether it be an RFP, whether it just be an idea, a lot of times you get clients that'll email you and say, oh, hey, so-and-so referred me to you guys. Can you do this? And we're like, potentially, but like, why do you want to do this? And we really try and actually start having a hint at that discovery phase very early on before we even get into a proposal. Because one thing that you all have probably experienced that's very challenging is building proposals off of way more unknowns than knowns. This is a tool that I pulled from How to Run Your Drupal Agency talk by Steve Parks at DrupalCon. We actually just recently used this, and it's pretty amazing. Previous to this tool, what we did was, and you probably can't see it too much, but I'll walk through it. But previous to this, if a client came to us, we would sit in the conference room with a couple people that potentially would work on the project, discuss, okay, this is what they want, and think about all these possibilities and try and determine if we want to work with them, go back and forth. Took absolutely forever. This tool took us about 20 minutes to make a decision. Right. And this is real data-based decision, which is amazing. So basically, I, again, understand you can't really see it, but I'll provide a link to it later in the presentation when we actually post these online. But at the top, you basically name what the project is, who the client may be, and then you ask questions about revenue and the team members that you may have, and you start asking questions based on degree of 1 being disagree and 5 being strongly agree. And those questions range from, will you learn something? Is this a project you want to work on? Does your team want to work on it? And you have 2 evaluators go through and score each of those. So then eventually you come out with an average at the very bottom. And if it's below 7, then it's basically a no-go. And it's above 7, it's a go, right? Done. That's it. So it's pretty simple. Of course, if you want to talk more, that's always welcome, because you actually want to be able to put a little bit more thought process into it. But this was really good, and we just used it, and it made a decision quite simple. Okay, so if it's a yes, obviously you'll start planning. If it's a no, determine ways that you can continue the relationship. There could be some opportunities there with the client. You don't want to just say, nope, bye, see ya. You want to be able to offer them some sort of advice, some sort of consultant position, help them maybe figure out more of what their needs are, help them find maybe another vendor that may work better for them, and leave them empowered, and also leave yourself in a really good spot for them to potentially come back to you. Maybe once they grow, maybe once they have a bigger project, maybe once they've figured out what their actual goals and objectives are, if they don't know them quite yet. And this is another oh yeah, I should have prefaced all this by saying I'm going to throw in some funny little memes just because we can't help ourselves. And I just thought this one was hilarious. So I'm sure you all have experienced that all the time. Okay, so post-selection, great. You have a new project and or client. What now? One quote that I pulled from the same presentation from Steve Parks, How to Run a Drupal Agency, it was work on the business, not in the business. And kind of similar to what Todd Ross was talking about in his keynote, is continuously be trying to improve and not just being reactionary or executing your ideas, just building sites. Continue to be working, figuring out like if it's a good project for the business and evaluating the client. Another thing is you should always know what you're doing instead of having just all these rumblings kind of happening around. You have projects that are running, but you don't really know the purpose of them. So all those sorts of things, you just need to kind of have your finger on the pulse. At some point, you may want to review your rates. You want to maybe watch for trends in the business, do health checks, things like that. I'm going to speak to these in a little bit more detail as we go. Alrighty, so another new process that we've just implemented in our company is this kind of Loathe like love process. And this is part of our health check. So you've been working on a legacy client maybe for about 4 years, and you've grown exponentially or just a little bit. Maybe they're not really a fit for you anymore. Maybe it's time to break up a little bit. Maybe it's time to have a talk. This was another data-based idea that we had where we actually put numbers to those 3 items, including a monetary value, but that's also quite easy data to pull. So we actually, as a company, determine what do you like about working with this client? What do you dislike? Do you like the person but you don't like the work? And we asked lots of questions like that, and then we also gave those people a rating, and then it helped us make better informed decisions as to what clients we may need to say goodbye to, and of course refer to other vendors. Again, I'll get to that more. Other things I wanted to point out is that the spreadsheet can determine if you're continuously trying to set expectations that the client just ignores, if they still maybe see you, like one thing I'm just going to speak about kind of one of our experiences is that at some point clients may still see you as that support company and that I just call them, they just fix that problem, done. And the clients can't really do that for us anymore. And so that's kind of an issue as well, because that's the expectation that they still have. And if we can't change that and help them grow themselves, then that's kind of an issue, because we also have to keep in mind that we can't get it taken advantage of and that we need them to kind of grow with us as well. Be ready and open for change. Oh, yes, go ahead.
So, in the last example that you were giving, where you've got a client who's expecting the instantaneous service kind of thing.
Right.
And they've been with you long enough that there are some things that they actually probably could handle themselves.
Yes.
How do you help the most logical person in their organization embrace the concept of accepting some training and then some concomitant responsibility?
Okay, so the question was, how can you help someone in their organization that may have the capabilities to make the revisions themselves accept that they can do that?
Mm-hmm.
So
because they're busy and they want to be doing other things, and if they wanted to build the website, they would have done it themselves from the beginning, or so they would say.
Right.
Even though they're not able to do that in fact.
Right.
But anyway.
One thing that I think is helpful is I think that if a client knows that they're going to lose you, it carries a lot of weight. So I think that, I hate to say the word ultimatum, but basically you need to be able to give them the information that they need in order to understand
The situation.
right, the real purpose of it. And also it can just come down to dollars. Continuing to come to us for really small things is just going to continue to cost them money, and we're not going to necessarily profit off that a lot. So it's kind of in their best interest to have someone on their end that can manage the system themselves. But we also make sure that we are happy to handhold to a certain degree as much as possible in order for that person to be empowered, and also making sure that, I mean, with Drupal, yes, it's a little complex, but if they've already had experience with it, if they are a current support client and have a Drupal site, it should be fairly simple for them to be able to learn that, and that it doesn't necessarily always take a lot of time. So those are usually some strategies that we use. And I mean, Yvonne, the owner, he can speak to that as well if you want anything to add.
I'd say that's maybe a red flag. That if you are having that kind of issue with the client, that's maybe something you should consider factoring into whether or not they should really be your client. And I mean, we're not advocating firing all your clients, but
right.
If there are clients that you've outgrown, the responsible thing to do is to let them know, and then to follow through and find an alternative for them, and not just say, okay, you're on your own.
Yeah, I'd like to add on that a little bit, is that sometimes those can really be good business opportunities. Because if you find another vendor who is an appropriate fit for that particular niche that you're no longer in, you know, if you can help your client have a soft landing into that position and establish a business relationship with this other vendor who can then, you know, if they come across things that are larger than they can tackle, you know, sometimes there's reciprocity there, and so you can wind up making it a business win as well as helping the client.
Yeah, it's good for your karma as well, right? Not to let them kind of just hang there.
Yeah. So a few different things. I think
make the business case to them.
Yep.
Right.
Make sure you understand internally the impact that that particular kind of client or that client is having on you.
Yep.
And then convince them it's not quite as bad as you think it is. We'll help you. We'll find somebody who can do this. We'll figure it out.
Right.
But keep the process of moving in the right direction engaged, as opposed to spending time.
Yes. Usually.
And I wouldn't necessarily say we'll find someone for you. I'd say we've found this great place for you already, as opposed to we'll do that. Here they are.
Here's their
and we've worked with them
picture.
before or not, but we're going to help you.
Yeah, that warm handoff.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear too with all of those three combined, because I do think that they're a bit of a trajectory, is that these would kind of be in stages. I mean, we've gotten into support clients where we're getting taken advantage of and they're asking all these kind of questions. We tried to empower the client. And so then we start seeing the red flag, and then we start thinking, okay, what's plan B? We're going to start seeing, like, who can we recommend them to? And so you want to have a nice package. But it's always good to warn the client that you're kind of letting go. And you know, we've done before too. We've just said, we're not necessarily going to be able to do this for you. However, we've got X in place. So any more questions around that? Okay, I'll move on. Alrighty. Okay, so your client happiness will ebb and flow like any relationship will, but just make sure it's more on the ebb. Wait, I don't know, whatever. Make sure it's happier than most.
Ebb is going away.
Yes. And I just make sure you don't go to a dark place, because we've had those experiences as well. So, kind of what we were just discussing with that question is, if you need to have the talk, just try and let them down easy. Couple of points: be nice and professional, as always. As we already talked about, find someone else that might be more appropriate for them, and make sure that you're ready to have that handoff. And also provide some transitioning time. Make sure that you're okay with a little bit of overlap, and that you've also kind of factored that into your work plan, knowing that eventually it's going to be a complete cutoff, but that you feel that they've been set up to succeed with their new vendor. And we won't say this, but you'll be thinking it maybe sometimes, depending on the client, depending on your situation. Okay, it's always good to have a little giggle every once in a while. Alrighty, so part of that exit strategy is clearly communicate your reasons. What is it? They're constantly have too low budgets. Oh, well, first I should say this is really hard. I don't think we really address like how hard this actually can be. I'm speaking about it like it's just super easy, and it's not. So that's why a lot of thought and a lot of planning will go into letting go of a client just as much as gaining a client. So it is a little bit easier sometimes when you don't like the work that you're doing, but it's still difficult. Make sure, again, they're in good hands. Provide the extra referrals. Keep in touch. Okay, do.
Sorry, was the last thing you said keep in touch?
Keep in touch, yes.
So after you dismissed a client, have a plan for staying in touch with them?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and kind of...
I find it so challenging to stay in touch with the clients that I've worked with, and then the project ends, and I haven't dismissed them. Like, even that I find difficult. And I'm not sure about keeping in touch with a client that I've been like, okay, go away.
Like once a quarter,
I agree.
once half a year.
Yes.
You should probably, I mean, that's our opinion, right? Just check in with them, see how they're doing. I've had lunch with people we've fired, and it's kind of the human, the courteous thing to do. And sometimes it's not easy.
Yeah. It just seems hard to keep track of.
The logistical thing?
Well, there's certain tools, like we use Streak, and for kind of like, it's kind of like a CRM
Streak's
tool,
great.
but it's kind of a way to kind of keep in touch with clients. But honestly, for me, it's a big challenge, especially if it was a bit sour in the end. But professionally, it is just business, and potentially, and you want your reputation to remain intact. So it's kind of keeping in touch and making sure that they are still in good spots, because you care about the work that you did. And then the people that, if they did go with someone that you referred, you want to make sure that they're still in a good place there. And then it could open up, again, future business opportunities, but you can always say no to them specifically.
Okay.
There's also, I think that keeping a good relationship with a client who understands, who's been through your process, has a sense of your work, and knows that they're not a great fit, they can sometimes be wonderful referral partners.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Because they might meet somebody in their travels where they're like, dude, you're so not what we are. You should call those guys, because we kind of screwed it up, but I think you could do it better.
And that's part of the reason why I want to stay in touch with
You try to stay in touch with clients who fired you. Like, for example, I had a client that I built a website for them, and then a couple of years go by and they hire someone else to do the redo instead of coming back to me. So what sort of efforts does it make sense to putting in touch with keeping in touch with them?
That's a great question.
I can answer that.
Yeah.
There are 2 clients that have fired us, and one of them fired us explicitly and went to a larger competitor, and another one kind of just disappeared and started using someone else. And for the second one, we didn't pursue talking to them at all. And for the first one, it was kind of sour and kind of bitter, and I didn't pursue that either. It just kind of felt like the wrong thing to do. But I guess I never thought of what should you do? Should you pursue it?
In your case number 2, those are some situations where we will follow up with them, because we have found that we've learned some important lessons from some of these cases. We've had clients go in because they didn't realize we're doing item A for them, and they needed someone who could do A and B, and they didn't know that we could do.
They never asked you about B.
Right, and we realized we're not doing as good of a job talking to our clients about the things that we can do, so we should start doing that better. So there's some valuable feedback that you can get out of it, but I almost treat that as like marketing research budget as opposed to sales budget, as far as like how I'm allocating funds to like staff. I think about like, okay, this is research time, and it's worth getting that research in, as opposed to it might not necessarily be another sales opportunity.
I also think it's much easier to follow up with someone if you're the breakup-er as opposed to the breakup. Right? If you're getting fired, it's hard to go back to that place.
Right.
If you're doing the firing, maybe it's a little easier.
Right.
In my organization, we send people to Baja. It's a reference that they make to whale hunting, blah, blah, blah. It's not really important. But we basically put them into reserve. And then periodically when we have downtime, people are responsible for going back and kind of looking at that list again. And before you put them in Baja, you need to kind of document why did this relationship not work out. There's the ones that we lose because they went with a competitor. We frequently just say, mark that as lost. But if it's something where they lost us, they said, we started a relationship and then they ended it at some point for some reason, it's worth checking back. And it's almost worth Google stalking them to know whether it's worth checking back yet, because there are going to be changes in personnel, there are going to be changes in their business, and at those changes may be an opportunity for them to re-embrace what you offered if you still offer something that they need. But I think it makes sense because it costs too much to get a customer to just let go.
That's true. Okay, looks like we only have about 20 more minutes, so I want to get through a few more things. Love the discussion, though. We'll have more of that. Hopefully we have a little bit of time. So one thing after you've had this is your current client situation, do continue to evaluate. Make sure you're setting your boundaries. When you hold lessons learned for each project, which is a process that we use, we talk about how the project went, what did we learn, like what communication was like with the client and internally. Learn from those mistakes and then understand how you now need to change your strategy for future projects, make database decisions, and then also look at how you came out, look at your profit, and also see if you really did learn something. And if you didn't, is there potential to do so in the next project? Things you don't want to do. A lot of these things are pretty straightforward, and I'm sure a lot of you know, but it's always good just to kind of like burn it in your brain. Don't overpromise. Again, you're just going to set yourself up to fail. And an example of overpromising is kind of saying, oh, sure, we can kind of fully design your website and build a content strategy and et cetera, when all you do is build websites. And so you're going to need to pull in all of those resources, and you're going to need to find those people, and that's going to take your time. And if you're not necessarily the expert in that, then you potentially are not going to have a great project. However, if you already have all those people at hand, great. Then you can do it. Don't underestimate for obvious reasons. You want to make a profit. And you also want to make sure that you're giving an estimate of hours and numbers based on what you actually can do. And it is reasonable. We all know that process isn't necessarily fun, but if you feel happy with it, with what you give the client in terms of a budget, and then they say no, then they're not the right client for you. Work for hire. Basically that means just don't just execute tasks. You're their consultant as well as their site developer. Don't choose revenue over peace of mind. A client that maybe you already know is going to be terrible, but they want to give you a lot of money, it's kind of hard, right? But yeah, eventually you're going to be kicking yourself. And don't let it die a slow death. If you have been working with a client for, let's say it's 2 years, and after year 1, or even after the first 6 months, there were red flags all over the place and you just didn't address them and you just kept fighting through it, and it's a year later and your staff and you as a business owner are still just dying over this terrible client and project, it's just not healthy. So, address those red flags as early as possible. Oh, and one note that I did have that I wanted to make mention. The continuous negativity, everyone has it. Not every project's going to be amazing and fun, and not every client's going to be amazing and fun. Well, again, you'll have ebb and flows, but if you're having consistent negativity within your organization and you have developers that are complaining and then you're like, oh, they just called, I have to answer that call and everything, then there's just going to be that negative energy, and nobody wants that. So we've kind of talked a little bit about what your experiences have been. So I think that we can kind of move on from this discussion because I just want to get through the second half of this presentation and then be able to open it up and we can have more Q&A and discussion. Sound good? Good. All right. So Selecting your people. And I got a little burgundy there. So some things for selecting the actual people that work and do all the fun stuff in your organization. You try and use a combination of traditional and behavioral interview methods. That's, determining the culture fit, determining like what their personality is like, as well as your skill sets, hard and soft. Advertise in your industry. Don't necessarily go out to recruiters, because you're just going to kind of get a boatload of people from, you're not what?
Because they suck and they're expensive.
I know, that was what was in my mind, so I'm glad you said it. Have a clear process and figure out like what your right person is. Like, know how you're going to interview the person. We have a very casual interview style because we really want to be able to get to know the people. You can see on the resume, you can see hard skills, but we want to know what would they be like with the client, like what would they be like with our organization, and also always just give people a chance just to work as a contractor. Have a plan, like, come in for 3 to 6 months, work on this project, and you can get a really feel for their work, and then maybe hire them after that or not. Okay, so the right person. And Todd spoke to this a little bit in his keynote, which was awesome for me because I was like, oh my goodness, I totally just have those slides as well. So, one thing. So, the right person, existing team members. So what this means is when you do have a new project or have a new client going on, are the existing people that you have in an organization enough? Or do you need more? Then the second bullet point, if you need more, should you go to a contractor or just a vendor? Will they do the job? Should you have a new hire? Then that's a whole new process. Usually you like to know that stuff kind of early on. There's a whole system. You want to make sure you have a few projects under your belt. You've got several hours the rest of the year before you kind of go into the new hire phase. Or are there new skills that the people in your organization need? And again, per the keynote, Todd mentioned kind of making sure that you actually have training plans for people. We do that at our organization as well. So if there's things that people want to know, maybe it's a new coding language. For me, it's more organizational development, it's more business stuff, it's UX stuff. We have that opportunity, and Iman says, whatever, learn it. Awesome. So that's just a really great thing to have because everyone should feel that they are empowered to kind of learn what they want. Also, mentorship, determine if any mentorship is needed. Make sure you do have some sort of onboarding process, even for small businesses. One book that I'd recommend is The First 90 Days. It's a Harvard Business Review book, and in my resources I actually have it listed, so if you're ever interested in reading that, it's really helpful. I found this really awesome quote about bad employees, which was kind of profound in my opinion. And so this, similar to saying no to a client, this is when you get to the point of you have one of your team members that's just not a team player. You need to do something about it. What should you do? Before I move on though, so from this article on Inc.com, I wanted to mention having a bad person in your organization can threaten the morale of other employees. Bad team members can do second-rate work, which obviously is not a good thing. It can hurt overall productivity. If they're not engaged or doing the best service, the clients and the people in your organization will notice. And if you're not willing as a manager to make these tough decisions about these poor employees, your team will notice and lose trust and respect for you. Okay. The wrong person. So we all kind of know some of the warning signs. They're tardy, there's lack of engagement, poor work ethic, not a team player, etc. These are extremely noticeable in small organizations. But they're not so much when you work at like a 3,000 company, corporation, or department. But still, it's noticeable regardless. Make sure to not ignore these things or ignore complaints from other team members. If you see these warning signs, have an intervention with the person. Try and do it early on. Document that intervention. Talk about why they're not doing so well. Talk about how you can help them, how they can help you. Discuss an improvement plan. Determine their goals, their interests. Maybe they just have something going on that's personal in their life, and they just need to talk about it, and it's not really about the work. Improvement plan could be, okay, well, we're going to start giving you this work so you learn this coding language or can work on this project that's fun, and then in 3 to 6 months we'll check in, see how you're doing, and then really set some of those milestones, and also make sure that there is someone there that can actually mentor them, and that they don't feel like they're just kind of on an island by themselves. But then if there's no improvement after all this work, then termination's the option. Also extremely hard, but you can't always avoid it. And if they're not the right fit for you, they could be thriving somewhere else, so you could potentially be actually holding them back as well. And again, document all of this information. Okay, so some preventative measures. You're not always going to know if you necessarily hired a bad person or employee. So, just evaluate your hiring process, do the best you can. Once they get in, something can happen, don't really know. But these are just some of the skills that you can, or the tips that you can use when hiring for people. Vet the soft skills. Are they good with clients? Would they be a good culture fit? Do they semi-match the personalities in the organization? And then you can always offer a trial period as well. Okay, so onto kind of communication side of this presentation. One thing that we always make sure to do, and we probably talk about on a daily basis, is practicing transparency and democracy. And informed people are happy people. One thing that we've determined is that maybe your team members don't always want to know everything. So if you have your business plan, you want to share numbers with them, you want to share with them like how things are going, it's great. I think they should always be informed, but maybe they don't really care that much. Ask them. They'll tell you. Here are some other actual leadership tips that we found helpful. Try and have monthly meetings with each person and actually do them. This is something Yvonne in 10-7 does on a regular basis, and they never get missed. Even when we're just having absolutely insane weeks, these one-on-ones happen, and they're extremely helpful, and that's your chance to just sit down with the employee, let them talk about whatever. Usually Yvonne first starts asking questions about what would you change about the organization? Like, how are things going for you? What are your problems right now? Like, is there anything that you want to talk about? And so asks a lot of questions and really gives us all the chance to just kind of let it all out and discuss how maybe we want to be better or do better. Again, I already mentioned sharing your business plan if your organization is so interested. I personally always think it's good to know if your company is profitable or not. And what your plan is. Like, maybe you just know what you're working on and you're like, yeah, but where's this going? What's the goal for 10-7? Provide some incentives. One thing that we do is for people that, I don't know, we've been having a really hard time with a project. It's been going on and on and on. Finally, the site launched. So we have a nice dinner or a happy hour or something like that. And then as the full organization, we have really great team building exercises. Try and do them quarterly, if not a little bit more. Usually that's like a twins game here and there. And it really goes a long way, because some statistics say that the more you hang out with your organization and get along, the better you're going to work together. So it's kind of a no-brainer just to go about this. But if you don't really know the people you work with, it's going to always kind of be a challenge to talk to them, ask them to do stuff, or have them do stuff for you. Oh, and then there's there's a happy kitty, because that leads us next into, is everyone happy? So you're doing everything you can, but maybe some people are happy, some aren't. You're never going to 100% know, but you can just do the best you can. One thing that I thought Todd said in his keynote was really interesting is that if a person leaves you, evaluate what you're doing in your organization. And that's a really good call. However, also some people maybe just want to do something different. And that's okay, let them go. Same thing with the clients. Keep in touch, ensure that they're happy wherever they are. They can be a referral sometime, which would be awesome. Okay, so I think that was it from there. Okay, so we're on to the takeaways, and I know I've been talking really fast, but I'm just trying to speed up the time here. A couple takeaways. Use tools that works for you. I know I mentioned kind of some spreadsheets that we just recently used just because we're also kind of building our process and trying to improve ourselves. But one thing that I think everyone now is crazy about is Slack, and we use that as an internal communication tool, which is awesome. And it has made our workflow so much more streamlined. And if you haven't heard of it, look it up. It will change your life. Keep everyone informed. So any major business decisions that happen in an organization rarely go without explaining to the employees. People at our organization are typically never just at a loss. And if they are, they're like, hey, why do you keep having this meeting with this person? What's that about? Well, Yvonne will just tell them. So it's just really important so they never feel like they're in the dark. They feel like they're actually a part of the organization. Forecast, track, report. Forecasting, the workload map that I kind of mentioned earlier, as well as kind of a financial forecast is really important to have. However your fiscal year ends is, whenever you decide to build that, of course, it's always kind of good to build that out for a year. Track those numbers, make sure you can see those trends, and report on them so that you actually can have real data to improve upon. Monitor and document, that goes kind of across the board at the staff level and the client level. And your operational level. So document kind of how you do things so that you can kind of look back and be like, oh my gosh, we did it that way. I can't believe we used to do that. Now we do it this way, and it's awesome. Continuously improve. Like, we all make mistakes. We're all failing. And you continuously improve on them so you don't make them again, but you're still going to make them. But we're always just kind of finding those ways to be better. Again, I know I went through that super fast. But if you guys have any more questions, please let me know. I'm open. Thanks. Yes?
Do you recommend exit interviews?
We do. Yes, we do. Do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, we actually have a guy, and he's awesome. And every time someone leaves, always schedule an exit interview. It's usually offsite or on the phone. I try to encourage them to be in person because you can get a lot of information just by body language. I'm never there. No one's ever there. It's just this person's team member or this person. And then I typically get a Word document report. And sometimes those are really hard to read, but they are informative, and they've been used at least at 10.7 to change things and find out about things that maybe wouldn't have otherwise.
Do you ever find that you try to if something is so bad, you just say, well, it's just this much, or do you always try and act on it?
I always try to act on it. I mean, if there's something bad, I want to change that. I came from a toxic environment in a previous company, and that's not what I want 10.7 to be, and and that's part of why we're doing the session, why Tiffany's doing the session, so that there's more info out there. It is hard to look at that info, though.
If you have an organization that's large enough where you have multiple people in a management position, one of the things I like to do is have not the person who's direct manager doing the interview, but a different person. If they have an issue with their manager, it's going to be really awkward for them to like say, hey, well, I'm leaving because I hate your guts, or whatever. You want to try to facilitate that conversation to give them as much freedom to actually just let it out, right, as they possibly can.
So we use a company called Employee Strategies, and they're a small HR company in the Twin Cities, like 5-7 people. And Jay's great, and he does it for us. Just as an example, one of the exit interview items that I had on 2 employees about 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, was I don't have any benefits. That's why I'm leaving. I'm going to the nerdery because they have benefits. And as a small business, it was almost impossible to compete with that. Because what are you going to do? You have 4 or 5 employees and you can't get a group plan because it costs so much. So with Obamacare and what happened with that law, we were able to actually do something. And so that would be a concrete example.
Anyone else? Any other thoughts? I mean, I'd love to hear from anyone about weaknesses that you've overcome or any issues that you have faced that have been challenges.
A couple of slides previous, you said keep your employees like in the loop of what your business strategy is. And one of the things that I do that quite a bit with our team because we're very R&D heavy. We have a dollar and time budget for research and development. And if my team knows some of the things that we're cooking around for what we want to do, that will shape some of the projects that they want to tackle. They might start researching this other cool thing because, that might actually apply to some of the stuff you're playing around with the potential shift in how you're doing business. So that's important.
Good. And also it keeps your employees kind of happy.
Yeah, they know what's up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have had occasions where you kind of forget to tell them maybe about like a new potential client or something like that. And they're like, wait, what's this all about?
Another thing is to know what your clients are up to.
Yes.
Because what your clients are doing will absolutely shift what your R&D is going to be doing as well.
Yep.
If your client wants to do this new hot thing, you might want to know how to do that new hot thing.
Yep. One thing I did too, I went to London last year. I was actually on vacation, but I decided to meet with a couple of Drupal agencies there because I was just curious as to how they ran their business. And it was really interesting the strategies they used as well. And they had also just done like, a couple that I met were just like, we just redid our day rates. We just let go all of these small support clients that we just can't handle anymore. And so it's really interesting to hear that like everyone's kind of trying to do this whole improvement process. So I think, talking to what clients are doing and also organizations, because that's another thing is they said that they had implemented ways that employees could spend time learning more about Symfony, Angular, and different kinds of coding languages, because then clients are just going to start asking for that and want that. And it's been really helpful. Any more questions? And everyone's super hungry now? Okay, cool. Thank you guys for coming. Thanks for attending. Sorry it was a bit of a delay, and then I went through that quicker than I had planned, but I hope you guys kind of learned something and feel a little bit more
Oh, can you
educated.
share that spreadsheet?